Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So this is part 2 of chapter 1. In this video, I will be talking about two main things. The first one is on the comparison between a plant cell and an animal cell. And the second one, right, I will be highlighting three cells that has undergone this process known as cell differentiation. So I will be talking about part 2, 3 and 4. 2 and 4 are more important. Part 3 is probably something that I think it is good to know. For the syllabus, right, there are two objectives. This is pretty straightforward. Okay, you need to learn how to compare the structure of a typical animal and plant cell. There are three which I will highlight to you. And the second one is heavier in a way. You must learn how to explain how the structure of specialized cells are adapted to their function. Okay, there are three cells that will be highlighted in this chapter, and you must learn all of them. The first one is a muscle cell, the second one is a root hair cell, and the third one is a red blood cell. Okay, you must learn the function and you must learn the structural adaptation. So let me start with plant and animal cells. Now this slide shows you the pictorial form between a general plant cell, which is on the left, to a general animal cell on the right. Okay, the labelings are all given to you. Please remember how to label them properly and how to identify them, and of course to spell them correctly. Okay, now let's move on to the comparison. The first thing to compare, right, is of course the presence and the absence of a cell wall. For plant cells, they possess a cell wall, and for animal cells, they do not have a cell wall. Okay, very straightforward, very easy. Now, the comparison of chloroplast, right, it's a little bit tricky. You must learn how to write properly, okay? So for plant cell, right, the best way to describe is that they may contain chloroplast because not all plant cells contain chloroplast. Okay, so I think the word using the word may contain chloroplast gives you, or rather enables the marker to know that you know that not all plant cells contain chloroplast. On the other hand, animal cells do not contain chloroplast. This is pretty straightforward. The third comparison can be on the vacuoles. Okay, for a plant cell, the vacuole is large and centrally located. Okay, they are pretty straightforward. And for animal cell, they are smaller and there are more of them. So we use the word small and numerous vacuole. This tree is good enough in my opinion. Of course, there are many other comparisons that you might want to do, but I think this tree is good enough. Okay, now let me move on to part 3. Part 3 is known as cell organization. It is not in syllabus, but I think it is good to know because it is a fundamental in cell biology. Okay, so how are cells organized in a multicellular organism like us? So we all know, right, in part 1 that a cell contains organelles. Okay, and there are many different types of organelles, then they are all packed in a cell. So the organelles each have a different function, and the cell contains many organelles, and the cell will perform specific function, correct? Many cells will come together to form what we call a tissue. Okay, and many tissues, right, will come together to form what we call an organ. For example, the stomach is an organ. The stomach contains muscle tissue because the stomach needs to churn, and the stomach also contains tissues that produces gastric juice. So many tissues forms an organ. It's a very typical way that we describe how organs work. And so yeah, if you think about all the organs in our body, they are all made out of different tissues. Okay, now when we talk about the word system, right, we're referring to many organs. And these many different types of organs, they will come together to perform a unique function. For example, digestion. And so we call them an organ system. So the digestive system, right, contains consists of the stomach, the mouth, the esophagus, the large intestine, correct? And these are all different organs, but they all come together to perform a unique function, which is known as digestion. So hence we term this big idea, right? We describe to them as a system. And of course, in a human, right, we have many systems. Okay, each of them is unique, And so a multicellular organism like us, right, is able to perform in a very optimal or very specific way. Okay, this is what it means. So over here, you can see what I'm trying to reiterate again. Many different cells forms a tissue. Many different tissues form an organ. Many different organs form a system. And many systems, right, will be in an organism like us, like humans. Okay, you can read up on this. I am not going to highlight them. And I guess this is what we call uh, cell organization. Okay, in the whole biology syllabus, right, you will be studying different systems. Not all of them. You will be studying the cardiovascular system. You will be studying the respiratory system, the digestive system, the nervous system, and a little bit of the endocrine system. Okay, not all of them, but I think it is good to know. Okay, so let's move on to the last one. Okay, cell differentiation. Now, cells, right, are presumably derived from stem cells. Okay, so all our cells in our body, right, comes from a primary cell known as a stem cell. And as the cell mature, right, excuse me, they will become more specialized because in order to perform their function better, right, they have to undergo changes. So this is called cell differentiation. Okay, it is a process in which a cell has become specialized for a specific function. In order to perform their function optimally, right, in order to perform the function so well, they will start to undergo changes and they will develop special characteristics. Okay, so in the end, right, the cells in our body, they all look different and they all perform in a different way. This is known as structure determining function. Okay, this is also a very broad biology concept. You can Google it and you can probably read more from it. Okay, but let me give you an example. You all know sperm cell has a tail, right? So you know, for a sperm cell to have a tail, which is quite unique, why does a sperm cell has a tail? So the question is, right, um, before we actually answer that question, you need to know what the sperm cell does. So a sperm cell, right, is to undergo sexual reproduction, right? And the sperm cell has to reach the female egg, correct? The tail is developed in a sperm cell to push the sperm cell forward. Okay, so no other cells in our body has a tail except for a sperm cell. And this is what I meant by when I try to explain to you what a specialized cell is. In this chapter, you will not learn the sperm cell. You will learn three different types. You will learn the red blood cell. You will learn the muscle cell, and you will learn the root hair cell. Okay. For each cell that I'm highlighting to you, I will talk about the function first, and I will talk about the structural adaptation. And you have to learn all of them. Okay, it is in the syllabus, and this is pretty heavy, and you have to remember all of them. So red blood cell. Let me start with the function first. The function is to transport oxygen molecules. Okay, the starting point is the lungs, and they transport them to the rest of the cells in the body. Okay, this is, I believe you already know the function of a red blood cell, so please write properly. Now, there are three structural adaptations for a red blood cell. Okay, I think four. The first one, right, is that the red blood cell contains this pigment known as hemoglobin. That is the reason why it is red, okay, because this is a red pigment. This hemoglobin, right, is able to bind to oxygen molecules to form a compound known as oxyhemoglobin so that the oxygen can be transported. So this is a very unique adaptation of a red blood cell. Okay, no other cells have hemoglobin. Red blood cells have, and it's because they need to transport oxygen. This is what we meant by structure and function. The red blood cells do not have a nucleus in human beings. Okay, nobody knows why, but I think the common hypothesis is so that the cell is able to store more hemoglobin, and so they are able to transport more oxygen. Okay. The third one is the shape of a red blood cell. The shape of a red blood cell is very unique. We describe the shape as biconcave. And this biconcavity of a red blood cell, right, increases surface area to volume ratio. Okay? And because the surface area and volume ratio is increased, the absorption rate of oxygen will also increase. Excuse me. The fourth one is that the red blood cell is very flexible. It is not rigid, and therefore when it is flowing around our body, right, it is able to squeeze through narrow blood capillaries. Okay, so for a red blood cell, there are 4 adaptations. For a muscle cell, the function is to contract. This contraction, right, will create a pulling force so that the body or the parts can be stabilized or the parts can be moved. Okay. For adaptation, they have only one. They contain a lot of mitochondria. So for a muscle cell, right, the quantity of mitochondria is more than usual. And because there are more mitochondria, they are able to release more energy through aerobic respiration. Okay, so that the muscle cells can work. So this extra energy, right, is used for more muscle contraction. The third one is a root hair cell. Okay, now please do not confuse root hair with root hair cells. Root hairs, right, are actually found on the root. Now you are looking at one root hair and you can see this little stuff sticking out of the root hair. Okay, now these are root hair cells. So a root hair cell, right, is actually on the root hair. So a root hair cell is it's quite confusing, right? A root hair cell is a cell on a root hair. Okay, so a root hair cell is not a root hair. The function of a root hair cell is to absorb water molecules and mineral salts from the soil into the roots of a plant. Okay, their function is for absorption, not transport. They have 3 adaptations. The first one is that it is long and narrow. This long and narrow protrusion of a root hair cell, right, will increase surface area to volume ratio, and the higher the ratio, the higher the rate of absorption of water and mineral salts. Okay, means they can absorb faster. So you're looking at a root hair cell with a protrusion, and this protrusion is long and narrow. Okay, you can see in this diagram. The second adaptation is that the cell sap, right, the cell sap which is in the vacuole, the cell sap, right, contains a high concentration of mineral salts. This mineral salt, right, will decrease water potential. You will learn more in chapter 2. And because the water potential decreases, water molecules can continuously enter the cell by osmosis. Okay, so this is the second adaptation. And the third and final one is that a root hair cell also contains a lot of mitochondria. And because a lot of energy is needed, okay, through respiration to absorb mineral salts. This absorption of mineral salts, right, using energy is known as active transport, which you will also learn in chapter 3. Okay, so this is the 3 adaptations of a root hair cell, and this is actually the last slide. Okay, and with this is end of part 2, and actually the end of chapter 1. So for chapter 1, you need to learn uh, 3 things. Okay, the parts of a cell, the comparison between an animal and a plant cell, and the structural adaptation and functions of the root hair cell, a red blood cell, and a muscle cell. Okay, if you can nail all that, then that's it for chapter 1. Alright, so that's it. Okay, thank you. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Bye.